Richard Taylor is an academic and administrator working at the University of Leicester who was portrayed in a film about the search for the remains of King Richard III as being, his words, misogynistic and weasel-like. Now he's won substantial damages from the comedian Steve Coogan, whose Baby Cow company made the film. Coogan says he's still pleased with The Lost King, which is about a woman obsessed with finding Richard's remains under a car park. But this is an important case for anyone trying to make drama out of real life.
Yeah, so The Lost King is supposedly a portrayal of the search for Richard III in Leicester in 2012, of which I was heavily involved at the university. And rather than being shown in the way I acted, which is constructively facilitating the search to take place, I'm shown as the villain of the film, thwarting the heroine's move at every juncture and distorting the media in order to put the university centre stage and exclude others. And that's essentially the gist of it, and essentially the gist of the legal action that I took.
Now, presumably there was a moment when you sat down for the first time to watch the film. Can you remind us how you felt?
Well, I'd had to make the initiative myself to try and see it because I'd not been approached by the producers. So I made the running on that. And then eventually I was allowed to see the film. And it's this kind of surreal feeling of shock to see someone who looks like you, who speaks like you, who dresses like you, but behaves in a way that falls so far short of the way you would behave, represented on screen in that way was pretty devastating. And I spoke to the producers and said, I think you've got this wrong. I can show you some evidence. Would you consider changes? And they said no. And hence we ended up with the action that we did.
Well, as you've just rightly pointed out, in a sense, films very often need a heroine, in this case the woman who is pursuing her search for the remains of Richard III, and they need a villain. And in a sense it was your bad luck to be the villain. But you don't necessarily think they set out to smear you. It was just that they didn't have the proper information and then didn't try to find it.
I think they deliberately set out to create a narrative arc of baddies and goodies, which I understand as a dramatic art. A dramatic arc is justifiable. But if you're going to do that, you can't then simultaneously claim it's a true story. So it's either one or the other, and that's where they went wrong in this.
Absolutely right. And has this had a bad effect on your career, mental health, life since the film came out?
Well, there was a period, particularly when it came out, where you feel so helpless. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how it's going to play out in the professional setting. My current employer at Loughborough University, the British Paralympic Association, is a key partner. In the film, I'm shown pulling impressions of disability and having a good laugh. And, I had to reach out to colleagues and partners to say, this film's coming out. I'd need to reassure you that that's not me. That's not the way I behave or have ever behaved. And that was really challenging. I mean, it did help mitigate some of the impact of the film, but it took a toll having to do all of that personal running. Meanwhile, Steve Coogan is touring the sofas of the broadcasters of the country saying, this is a fantastic true story.
And he hasn't sounded notably contrite since this case, since your action. Has he reached out to you at all? Has he picked up the phone to say, listen, I'm really sorry about this?
No, of course not. Not at one jot. I mean, I wrote to Steve back in 2022 before I knew he was heavily involved, but knew he had a role, saying, you've been the victim of media intrusion and privacy. Is there anything you can do to help? Here's my number. Here's my email address. Be in touch. Got no reply. After the event, I mean, you'll have seen some of the statements that Steve has made. I think they say more about him than they do about me, if I'm frank, and I'm not going to get in the gutter with Steve over some of that. What I would say is Steve has signed an undertaking at court, a Tomlin order, not to repeat the defamatory, untrue statements about me in the film, and I'll hold him to that.
This seems to me to be quite an important moment, not just for you, not just for Steve Coogan or this film, but for the whole business of sort of fact-based drama, whether it's television or film. Do you think this is an important moment as well, where, we get lots of allegedly historical reconstructions of things which are twisted and distorted to make a narrative arc?
Yeah, and I look, I knew this was a dramatisation. I'm not expecting the film script to be a verbatim transcript of all the boring meetings that we had over 18 months around the activity. I accept that dramatic licence is an important part of this. But in the preliminary judgment, the judge said that what needed to be the case was that the film as a whole needed to be substantially true. And that's not what happened in this case. And I think there is a precedent there for other producers of fact-based drama, the clue's in the word fact, of course, that if you're going to tell a story and you're going to claim it's true, it genuinely needs to be true. Dramatisation is fine. Incredible narrative arcs are fine, but if you're going to tell things that are not true, you need to change the name of characters, you need to change the name of organisations in them. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself on the wrong end of a defamation case.
Very, very true. Finally, there is a heroine in this film, obviously the independent, the outsider, as it were, played by Sally Hawkins. Do you accept that she was, whatever else has happened in the making of this film, whatever's been said about you, that she has been a bit of a heroine?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is the irony of all of this. I've consistently said all along that Philippa Langley was the originator of the search. Without her, this would never have happened. But equally, the role of the academic archaeologists was critical in citing the trenches. So it's not an either or. And for the filmmakers to present it as an either or, it might make a good story, but it's not true, and they shouldn't claim it's true. But yeah, absolutely. Philippa's role was pivotal.
Good for you. Richard, congratulations and thanks for talking to LBC.